P.O.P. podcast, let's go. The P.O.P. podcast, let's go. The P.O.P. podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to the P.O.P. podcast. I'm Jason Sirotin, your host, and joined by my co-host, Scott Haley. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing great, Jason. Good to be back with you.
Absolutely. And we have a very special guest, somebody that we're both very friendly with. On today's show, the esteemed Dr. Mark Coreil. Dr. Mark practices orthodontics out of Lafayette, Louisiana. You can go to his website at coreilortho.com, and that's Coreil ortho.com. Dr. Coreil, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Jason. Thanks to you and Scott for having me over for a morning visit. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to you. Now, Scott, I know Dr. Mark because we've worked together. He was actually a marketing client a couple times, a design client, and I would consider a friend. But how do you know Dr. Mark?
Yeah, Mark and I go back to a lot of years when we were working and collaborating at Ormco, to be honest. And now also, Mark was pretty instrumental in some of the things we were doing at Ormco, not only in terms of doctor education, but helping us design and evaluate new technologies that we were doing there. I think probably the other thing about Mark that has been super helpful for me over my career is I could always introduce him to a doctor, and Mark would do his magic in terms of being able to, really share use his technical expertise to help us, help orthodontists. So it's a lot of years of relying on him.
That's awesome. And I always knew Dr. Mark from Judd and everybody I met being with, he's a player. He's one of the smartest guys in orthodontics. You need to get to know Dr. Mark. So, Dr. Mark, how did your journey in orthodontics begin? When did you get started? When did you fall in love with the profession?
So I fell in love with the profession in dental school. The intent was to become a dentist, right? And then in short order, a gentleman who subsequently became my department chair said, you guys should make good grades, and one day you'll have the opportunity to specialize should you choose. And I realized that injections were not going to be my favorite. So I said, like physics, like all the science side, but I don't like the injection side. So I said, orthodontics is it. So worked really, really hard at that. And so the love started then. My childhood orthodontist was very instrumental. And by the way, I bought his practice.
Oh,
so,
whoa.
Yeah, it was a great story. And I have to tell you this side note, because this is really good, right? So he's winding down his practice, and we go to the closing, and he brings my chart.
Oh.
And he opens the chart, and he has all these red lines about broken brackets, not wearing rubber bands. He said, of all the people in the world, you're the last person that should be buying this practice. So it was a good line. But the love for orthodontics started in dental school, and I'll give credit to him and my childhood dentist as well. Dentistry is just an amazing profession. And the relationships that you develop with patients can't be compared to anything else.
Yeah. So you bought a practice that was in your hometown, the town you grew up in?
I did. So that was subsequent to me opening my door. I opened up solo. I graduated on a Friday, 1988, and I opened up on Monday. I took records on the first 4 patients on Monday. I had 1,100 square feet of a rented building, and myself and 1 employee, and I did all my lab work. So I started from scratch, and I think that that's still an amazing opportunity for orthodontists today. It's a story that I tell. In fact, I had a call over the weekend from a former student about the same thing. So I started from scratch, and then subsequently I picked up my childhood orthodontist practice later as just a satellite.
So where'd you end up going to school?
So I'm an LSU Tiger, start to finish, and I started at LSU in undergraduate with a focus in chemistry. Always being a scientist, right? My part-time job was in a laboratory doing chemistry research, and then accepted to dental school early, went to dental school at LSU, and then was accepted to the LSU Department of Orthodontics, finished there, and then now I teach there. So it's been purple and gold tigers all the way. Very proud of my school, my alma mater, and it's been LSU 100%.
As you were building your practice, what were some of the biggest challenges just starting out?
The biggest challenges were understanding the business side, right? I was able to access several friends and to be able to build a business model. How do you build a pro forma when you know absolutely nothing about business? And so how many starts do you need? How do you cover the rent? How do you cover the supplies? How much do you order? And so fortunately for me, the LSU alumni crew that was in my general area, they were a phenomenal group, were so helpful. They would allow me to go into their offices and pick up all the paperwork and, duplicate what I needed, and they would share information. So I took full advantage of that and actually started a study club with this group of very brilliant men, and I could list them all, but too many to list, really. And so the problem was business by far. And I think that, what Scott was talking about earlier, unfortunately I couldn't make the P.O.P meeting, but it's collaborating with doctors and understanding their perspective. I need to, to this day, I need to learn more about the business side of orthodontics.
Well, you didn't go to school for business. You went to school to make great smiles and improve lives. So I think that's always a challenge for, I always have great respect for people who can be great doctors and great business people because it's two very different professions. How do you balance it? Do you have a team that does kind of the heavy lifting on the practice management side?
Absolutely. So at this point, I've been fortunate to find a very qualified accountant. She's an MBA and she's a CPA, and she works for me part-time. So she balances the business side, and I lean on her very heavily for all of her analysis of where we're at from an overhead standpoint, as well as my friends over at Gauge 360. They're helpful too. We maintain a relationship, and so we're able to get some input from them. But I have to say that Jennifer, my business leader, her perspective as an outsider looking at orthodontics is extremely different than looking at it from the inside. So she's extremely helpful in that regard. And so when I say I want to do a new hire, or have a new hire, she's like, "Oh no, you don't." She said, "Your overhead's still running, 2 points over," and she said, "We're going to work without it." So that's how I've balanced it as of recent.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, can you talk a little bit? This is kind of the conversation that I have in my circles, primarily in my household, because I have a spouse that works in orthodontics as well. But let's talk a little bit about what, you talked about coming into your own as a clinician and a business owner, in the 90s and 2000s. I would assume that's like,
right.
And then, my journey in my career, we saw the advent of DSOs and OSOs coming in around 2015. Probably it really felt like it started taking off. But you've been a part of. We've had cycles like this before this, right?
We have.
But talk about the business of orthodontics and what has the corporate world. I mean, how has this changed the competitive landscape in your market? Or are you in a situation where, nothing's really that much different than it was 20, 25 years ago?
No, that's a really good question, Scott, and thanks for asking it. Obviously, with this recent tidal wave of activity that started, Chris Benson and I had this conversation, 15 years ago, and he said, this will be around for a while, and it'll be interesting to watch and see how it plays out. But as of recent, what has been interesting, let's just say, before the changes in the market, and I guess still to this day, it's the FOMO, right? But when you break it down, if you take someone like Jennifer and they start to break it down, and other experts, by the way, and you break down a solid orthodontic practice that's thriving with great profits, and you look at what's there, it's like they would tell you, don't give up that. Don't even consider giving that practice up because of the fact that you keep milking the cow. Don't sell the cow, right? It's like you've earned it, you've gotten here, and then when you start to look at it closely, there are other ways to manage that situation. Yeah. And that's where we're at right now. It's it hasn't changed our competitiveness in our area at all. I have many friends in organized dentistry. In the OSO industry, and I respect them greatly. Our particular model is about taking advantage of things like P.O.P, right? P.O.P and other things. People like Jason who help us thrive, and how to grow the market and how to be organically successful at the business of orthodontics without having to give it all up and give up control. I had a personal experience with this, right? At one point during the transition, I've started several practices over the years, and I sold and I practiced with pediatric dentists, large organization, big practice, seeing in excess of 150 a day. But I gave up total control, and I built the orthodontic side of that practice from zero to a significant amount of money in a period of about 4 years. But I'll tell you, when you give up control, you didn't go to orthodontic school to be controlled. You went to orthodontic school for independence. When you gave up control, it was fantastic during the honeymoon. But when we got to about year 4 and things were rolling, and I needed resources to continue and they were denied, it was at that point I said, I'm out. And I left again, started a new practice. So I am currently 4 years into a startup, and I can tell you more about how that's going, as the program continues. We just keep reinventing ourselves. And a good friend of mine who's a financial analyst said, if you have a good business model, it'll be successful no matter where you go. And he's been totally correct about that.
I love that. What a great story, and kind of echoes kind of the points of this podcast and what Scott and the team at P.O.P are doing. Can you take us through what kind of analysis should someone be taking right now when they're tempted by that cash offer, that out? What would you say to them they need to look at?
First thing would be, do you enjoy controlling your schedule, right? You have an assumption when you're in school, I'm the boss, and I'll say, I'm going to take off next week to go on vacation with my family. Well, just keep in mind, now that you've given up control, that may be denied, right? Totally. Right. Also, you're limited to how much money you make in the future. I don't care what the cash payment is. That's it. It's over. And then, with the non-competes and everything that go with that, fortunately for me, in my situation, I did not have an equity stake. And so I was able to open up without, restriction. But I would say, beware of what you went to school for, right? I don't know a single orthodontic resident. I've graduated, in excess of 150 orthodontic residents that I was a part of their training, right, at LSU. I can't remember a single resident that said, I want to graduate and be an employee forever, right? I want to be in control. I want to create. I want to have freedom, and I want to be my own eventually. Many of them take an avenue different in the beginning, right, for various reasons, but ultimately it's to grow, however you choose to do that. That's the advice I would give them. Remember what you went to school for.
And I feel like I'm in part of Friday Night Lights. That was kind of inspiring, Jason and Mark. I can tell you've had that conversation with residents over the years, Mark. Yeah, you're right. And I think we got to be careful about that, right? It's interesting that journey early in their career, there's nothing wrong with them trying to figure out where they want to live.
No. You know what else is interesting, Scott, about that question is that, and unfortunately at LSU, we have this diversity of instructors. We have 18 part-time instructors. And they bring this, this very diverse practice style. So we have one faculty member that practiced with himself and his wife for his entire career. We have other people that had 12 chairs in the clinic. And when it's all said and done, they hear examples of it's really only matters of what you take home and what you want. It doesn't matter if you have 2 chairs or 22 chairs. So you have to watch the market, and if you equate success with money or volume, you may be totally off key. and you may have a comfortable living in a variety of ways. And so always remember what you're after, right? Personally.
Right. And how many times over the years have you or I met this doctor, and you, like, from the outside, you see the 3 or 4 chairs, you don't think a whole lot's going on, but the reality is that practice is more profitable and has more going on than the three, the guy with 2 buildings and 24 chairs, right? Because people can spend themselves out of a lot of money sometimes being big.
Isn't it the truth? I'm going to give you the perfect example. These are real examples. So I'm a tech junkie. So because I'm a tech junkie, my overhead tends to be more in line with the national average, right? I can name you 3 examples. I won't do this on air, but I have 3 examples that the overhead in their practices, these are multi-million-dollar practices at LSU, faculty members with myself, 30%. Overhead, 70% profit. And the way it's done is that they were frugal and they knew what they're doing, their treatment planning, they're just paying attention to the details and so on. So when you look at the industry, it's all doable, different shades of success, right?
Right. And like you said, the beautiful part about what you guys do, and I think that's like outsiders that aren't doctors like Jason and I get so excited about this, is there's so many different avenues to, you can be a boutique practice, you can be a monster practice, there's so many different flavors of what you can build, and you can build something that's appropriate for you, your family, your community. And that's just incredible, right? It's really, really incredible.
I think it's all about, and I definitely want to touch on that at some point. You said a key word there about community. So when it's all said and done, social media is extremely powerful, right? I think the things that Jason does are amazing, right? I think that marketing, it carries us, but the reality is we have to bring the patient in. It's at that point, what do we do with the patient? If we create an advocate, and our goal is to create advocates with every single one, I still feel that is the most important aspect of it all. Bringing them in from and getting their attention and all the noise of the world, and it's ever so difficult, as you both know. But once they arrive, it's like, can you retain that, and can they bring 20 more patients to you? And we're proving right now that they can, because we're providing our choice. We're providing very high touch service, and it's our style. So the reason they show up to see us is that we're high touch, and the alternatives that they heard about may not be high touch. And it may be a large clinic that they just don't want to be in that environment.
I call those patient billboards. They're just
Yes.
out there. That smile is the bat signal, right? Oh, that looks great. Oh, you just got your braces on? Oh, you were aligned with therapy? I mean, that's where a lot of conversations start. Marketing is there to support after that conversation, right? Because
Correct.
then people go and do their research. They want to validate. But that relationship, and that's what we found too. Practices that really have a care and an understanding and are personality based do much better than practices that are a little bit more rigid and all about it's about the personality of the doctor that plays in it too. I wanted to ask, there's a big question, because I think you're rare that you can answer this because you've played both sides. You've done this twice. You've started practices twice, once a while ago and once now. What are the big differences between starting a practice the first time and the second time? Was it way easier, or was it about the same?
I wouldn't say way easier, but there are huge advantages to today. In the 90s, we obviously had orthodontists did all the orthodontic work for the most part, right? So the traditional referral patterns existed. I was in a small town. You had all the orthodontic patients in that community. I had a couple of general dentists that I worked with that did their own, and I've always been 100% supportive of that. I've never denied that. I still continue to teach dentists to this day. My referrals, whatever they want to learn, I'll help them learn it, right? It's an advocate. So we had easy access to patients. There were fewer patients, right? Now it's so prevalent. Everyone, quote, deserves a smile or wants a smile, right? We call it the Instagram craze. Like everybody wants the perfect smile so that they can look great on social media. So that was easy. You didn't have to go searching with advertising, things like that. The advantage today is the marketplace is so much bigger, right? So I look at industry, and that's usually a common thread, right? I'm not a business guru, but I think that anybody that looks at an industry, how big is the pie? The pie is massive, right? So if anybody says the golden days of orthodontics have passed, they are 100% wrong, because the pie has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in our particular practice, case in point, Jason, the majority, 90% of our adults, or maybe higher, I don't have the stat right in front of me, are retreats. And some of them as recent as 6 months ago. They come out of braces from somewhere else or aligners from somewhere else, and they're still not pleased. So when you say the pie, they may have been treated once or twice. We may be treating them the third time. They're still searching for that result, right? So the pie is bigger, and without question, the technology. Without question. Whether you say it's plastic, it's aligners, it's predictions, whatever you do, we can educate the patient better. They feel like they understand it. I love animations, right? I just totally love animations. And so to be able to animate a result and why you're doing it and the benefits of doing it, the why, the how, everything about it. So I would say opening up an orthodontic practice today is the ultimate prime time. Whenever I went to open this last one, the only comment I got, they said, dude, you're like, you're like 60 years old, you're going to open a practice? And I said, yeah. They said, are you nuts? I said, no, I am confident in orthodontics because this is it, man. This is the heyday. Yeah. And it's proven to be that. And I'll let out a stat. I was on the call with my good friend Stacy at 360, and she said, last year over year, you were 44% up. Now, that had to do with opening a second location, but year over year, 44% is pretty substantial. We are growing at a rapid pace, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I can elaborate more on that later.
That's awesome. Hey, all right, I'm going to throw out something that I probably just in my head I think about, and I really haven't brought up with a lot of orthodontists, but with you being faculty, I think it would be interesting. And in the arc of your career, you and I have talked about product and technology and what it does for the efficiencies in the clinic. When I started in this industry, Mark, I would say that, a solid practice that kind of felt like it was at capacity could do about 300 starts. I mean, that would have been a pretty good practice, right? 300-400.
Right.
Technology allows a solo doctor to do a lot more than that on 4 days a week, I would assume, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We're probably at the point of, a solo doctor probably on 4 days a week with utilizing technology, and if they had the chairs, they could easily do well over 1,000 starts potentially, right? Is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you about this, because we're still producing more orthodontic residents. Now, if you look at the numbers of the residents we produced in the 90s and the early 2000s and the numbers that we're doing now and the amount of starts that they can produce, does that create a problem that should we be lowering the number of residents, or should we be increasing the number of residents? Or is that ever thought about in terms of a potential challenge in the marketplace?
I think it's thought about. Great question. I think it's thought about quite often in the traditional settings, right? Of course, those that have graduated would say, all right, that's enough, guys. And, we can slow this thing down. We don't need any more schools. We don't need any more programs opening up with large classes. I don't think that's changed the market in a negative way. I think that as long as doctors are practicing good orthodontics, that's all that's important. It is spoken about quite often, but I think it's important that we have an adequate supply of postgraduate trained orthodontists to be able to take on the task. In order to grow the bigger pie needs to be serviced, right? And my comment to that is the majority of orthodontics that you learn in your career, and both of you know that, occurs after graduation, right? So I'll take a line from a good friend of mine who's an oral surgeon, and he said, there's just too many, he would, I don't want to generalize with dentists, but some people end their education in their junior year of dental school and they never learn anything new. But if you take advantage of all the continuing education, like the P.O.P meeting that you had and collaborating with colleagues, and you continue to learn, there's room for growth, there's room for orthodontists, and I don't think there's an oversupply. I think that everybody just needs to focus on the quality of the goods. And I think that what's interesting about that is it doesn't have to be regulated. The marketplace takes very good care of that. And Jason's very aware of the fact that social media is really taking care of that, right? So we live under constant review. I don't call it scrutiny. I just call it review. So if you're doing a good job, people are satisfied, it gets echoed. And so I don't see it as a problem. I really don't. And others would disagree with me, but I want to give people an opportunity. And I think that if a kid wants to grow up and be an orthodontist, I think they should have that opportunity. I had that opportunity, and I would not want to deny it to anyone else.
I'm trying not to deny them opportunities as well. I think it's interesting that one orthodontist can probably do 3 or 4 times as much as they used to be.
Well, there's no doubt. I'll tell you a quick side note, and I think that anybody who's been around orthodontics for a long time, like myself, my orthodontist tells a story. My childhood orthodontist of banding. When every tooth was banded, banding, quote, bonding of a case, that was a 4-hour event. They had to pinch a band for each tooth, right? You separate each tooth, pinch a band for each tooth, 4 hour. In fact, he told one story where he was banding the kid, and they hadn't finished for lunch. He takes the kid to lunch, brings him back, finishes up in the afternoon. We bond a case in 30 minutes, right? If it's fixed appliances. So yes, so technology allows that to happen, and very efficiently, by the way. And with regards to the number of cases that can be done well, when we look at monitoring and we look at skilled staff, that's the only limitation. The limitation is how much support staff do you have, right? It's like a hospital saying we can only do 1 surgery a day, or can we do 400 a day? It's all about support staff and technology.
In terms of, the educational part of what you do, what are you getting? Do you do that because you get a lot of joy out of it? What drives the educational side for you?
Absolutely. To continue to give back it's mainly to be around smart people, number one. And that includes my colleagues at the university and the residents. But these bright young minds, when you're around these top tier students and they ask brilliant questions, and you can't gloss over it with, this is the way I do it. And they say, well, tell me why and give me evidence of that. So it keeps you on your toes. That's number one. I feel better about it, and it's my contribution, right? So it's not a calling for everyone. My connection to the university, I felt like I owed it to my department chair because of the opportunities that I was given. He asked me to join faculty right after graduation, and I couldn't say no. And I enjoy going back, and I hope to continue for the rest of my career.
If you could tell a student who's thinking about becoming an orthodontist what they should think about before making that commitment, what would you tell them?
Any student wanting to be an orthodontist, the first thing I lead off with, advice-wise, is make A's, right? There is no substitute. Unfortunately, it's all about making grades, and you have to score in today's environment because of just the legal aspect of it. The subjectivity's out. Students are chosen on an objective basis, and there is an interview, but for the most part, you have to have reached the threshold of being accepted. So that's it. Number one, make the grades. Number two, continue to learn diverse areas of beyond orthodontics, right? If I could do it over, I wish I'd become an engineer first because of the work that I was able to do with Scott and Ormco and continue to do with Ormco. I like the engineering background, but it's not a traditional path. I did chemistry instead. But focus on the sciences, learn everything you can about business, and focus on developing those interpersonal skills. because when it's all said and done, this is what we say in our morning huddle every day. Patients are seeking us out for a smile, but more importantly, what we give them is ourselves and an experience that they can't get anywhere else in the community, right? The big box stores, the big clinics, whether any kind of healthcare clinic that's large, the impersonal nature that they're received with is that if we give them an experience that they feel touched, known, we know their name, we ask about what they spoke about last time, we know their families, we know their pets, we know whatever. I tell my students and I tell kids, you just focus on people and do good work, right? And there's no denying it. Yesterday, we had a gift come into the office, and this young lady had drawn this nice picture of our logo. And I told the mom, I was so grateful, but I told the mom, I said, my mentor, Dr. Harold Worth, always said, if you're not getting gifts from your patients, you're not doing it well. And he was right. Because if you're not being gifted, that means they're not feeling it here, right? So fortunately, we've been getting quite a few gifts, so I think we're focusing on that. But people and grades, buddy.
I love that. Why did you join P.O.P? What was your decision?
Oh, that was an easy one. Scott's amazing, right? So, I'll go back to when we would do like an AAO event, right, or any of the national events. I love to go to the morning huddle with Scott. Scott was our national sales director, and to watch Scott's enthusiasm and just we're going to go get it. And listen, he's with a group of salespeople that have had a late night, right? A very late night. And they're at 6:30 in the morning. He's trying to fire them up to get going, right? We're going to meet our people, all of our doctors and staff and everything. And Scott just is committed to the profession. And when I found out about it, I think it was Trevor Nichols. I saw this podcast. And I saw Trevor, and you and Trevor were talking. I said, what's Trevor talking about? Because I have a lot of respect for Trevor. And I'm listening to Trevor, and I was like, what's he talking about? And Scott Haley, I said, what's up? So then I found out from someone else. I said, Scott's doing something new. I knew he had moved on, and Judd had told me. But when I knew Scott was involved, then I knew the purpose of P.O.P, right? We had been associated with an organization of doctors several years ago that we had a buying group. And it's called the Orthodontic Buying Group, and we had become a group, and we were able to negotiate, and we finally had the power. Back then, more now with P.O.P, but we had the power to purchase at the rates that the big companies could, and the preferred rates are the difference in our in our profits, and so. Scott's motivation to be the best at what he does, and then the journey that he's on to be with a group of doctors that are in the same mindset, right? We're all trying to make it.
Yep. And if you're interested in learning about P.O.P, you can go to pop-ortho.com, schedule a meeting with Scott. He is the man. I highly recommend getting a meeting with him. And I also want to encourage you to go to CoreilOrtho.com. And if you're in the Lafayette area or you just want to learn about a really great practice and Dr. Mark, go to the website, check it out. If you do want a virtual consultation, they got an easy button here on the bottom that you can click, get that scheduled, and be on your way. Dr. Coreil, is there any other way that people, who want to talk to you, can reach out and make a connection to you?
Absolutely. They can reach out to me via email. It's my name, Mark, M-A-R-K, at DRCOREIL.com, Mark at drcoreil.com. But if you go to the website, all the information's on it. I'd look forward to talk to anybody. I love ortho.
I love that. And Scott, over at P.O.P, we just talked about it. There's a link up here at the top. People can schedule and make a call. But what's the process like of getting involved with P.O.P?
Yeah, get a hold of me. Really simple. We sit down and talk for 20, 30 minutes. I learn about you, your practice. That's my primary thing. I love learning about what you guys have going on. And then we just kind of talk about some of the exciting things we're doing at P.O.P and really see if you're a fit. I mean, I'm not gonna want, or people like Mark don't want you in the group unless you feel like it's a win for you as well. So I'm pretty good about telling people, like, I don't think this is a good fit, and we're looking for people that are good fits with our group. And then you sign up, we spend some time with your team, kind of get them up and running, and away we go. So we're excited to talk to people, and we're excited to see where we can bring this thing for private practice owners.
A meeting will take 30 minutes and you can learn a lot and make a decision for yourself and at least gather the information. So click that button at the top. And for those who need marketing help, make sure you go to brainbitescreative.com and you can reach out to Caroline at brainbitescreative.com. She'll give you a free digital marketing analysis worth over $5,000 for free. And this is for Friends of P.O.P. podcast only. So make sure you reach out to Caroline. I want to thank again Dr. Mark Coreil and my co-host Scott Haley and the P.O.P. team. On behalf of everybody, we'll see you next time.
P.O.P. Podcast.